Hi, I'm Habiba Raouf. This is a video series where Art Plus Public brings you a behind the scenes look at Canadian artists' practice. We're particularly intrigued by collaborative practices in the art world. So, throughout this series, you'll hear from different team members as we dive into conversations with diverse artists and duos. We hope you learn something new, whether it's discovering a new artist or something you didn't know before about an artist's work you may follow. Today, I'm joined by Rhonda Weppler and Trevor Mahovsky to chat about their practices. Rhonda and Trevor make works that engage with public space and the history and function of public markers, yet also make themselves accessible to many levels of interaction. These works are often transformed through public interaction, assembled through crowdsourcing, or fabricated directly by participants. These works touch on ways people come together. For example, through shared meals, communal crafting bees, common spaces such as corner stores, or through shared symbols such as public clocks. In all cases, their works emphasize process and materiality, offering themselves as records of their own coming into and out of existence. Rhonda and Trevor are based in New York and Toronto, respectively, and have worked collaboratively since 2004. The recent video project, Crafts Abyss, was hosted by the Museum of Arts and Design in New York City. Their work is in collections including the National Gallery of Canada in Ottawa, the Vancouver Art Gallery, and the Museum of Contemporary Art in Montreal. In 2018, Weppler completed a major project for the Community Arts Program at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. Rhonda and Trevor are based in New York and Toronto, respectively, and have worked collaboratively since 2004. Their recent video projects, Crafts Abyss, was hosted by the Museum of Arts and Design in New York City. Their work is in collections including the National Gallery of Canada in Ottawa, the Vancouver Art Gallery, and the Museum of Contemporary Art in Montreal. In 2018, Weppler completed a major project for the Community Arts Program at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. They have received a Glenfiddich Residency Prize and an LL O'Day Sculpture Residency at York University. Their exhibitions in 2022 to 2023 included the Lower Manhattan Cultural Council's Arts Center on Governor's Island, Open Art in Sweden, and Susan Hobbs Gallery in Toronto. Hello, Rhonda and Trevor. I wanted to start us off by giving you a space to tell us a little bit more about yourself and your practice. What does your studio practice currently look like?
So we have a weird life where I live part of the year in Toronto because I teach at University of Toronto Sheridan joint program, and then I also live in New York. Did I say that? And I take the bus back and forth or train up to where our studio is, which is Trevor's basically garage and basement in his house in Toronto. So it's a lot of back and forth, but also online, working online. We talk almost every day. FaceTime almost every day about our work.
So can you talk a little bit about the process of making art for you? What is the first step? What's the middle? What's the end? And then what does a day in the studio kind of look like for you?
Did you want to?
We do a lot of different threads of work. So it's actually, I was thinking about that, and it was like, every month is different than the other month, and every year is different than the other year. And so it's kind of chaotic. Some days I get up really early and I'm working, and then other times I'm working in the evening. And sometimes it's in my studio, our studio. Sometimes it's in where Rhonda has a studio. Sometimes it's often on site. We often install things right, like that's why we're here in New York right now, installing right on site. So that's a lot of our interaction is while we're actually putting exhibitions together, but so it's unpredictable. It's a lot of the first step is always like model making and drawing and sketching and hashing through a lot of ideas and disagreeing about a lot of ideas, and we keep them in the back boiler though. Nothing ever disappears, but we have a healthy discussions and we argue, and that's why we work together. You know, we don't, it's not like just saying yes to everything. So there's a long process of that to come up with the idea, and sometimes that's very time consuming. Then once we make it, it depends on who is where, what's going on, what everyone's schedule is. But one of us will take the lead on some aspect of it, the other on another aspect. But it's never the same. Someone might take one role, one project, and another role, another project, and we just kind of do what we have to do to get through. Yeah.
It's like a blending of like your skills and kind of like flowing through projects and seeing where like your lenses kind of are, like where you can kind of find different things from each of you and then kind of working together to find like a good common ground or the best common ground, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it happens to do a lot to do with geography and wherever the project is. And if it's something in the States, usually I do those ones, and Trevor takes the lead on ones mostly that are in Canada, just out of like logistics.
And just like what do you know, what can you bring that you know better, and you have your natural expertise. If it was a construction involving construction, if it was involving, like, say, put up a bronze, and it was engineers and that kind of fabricators, building permits, I would usually do the project management on that end. But if it was these interlocking workshop things where it's, you know, figuring out materials, figuring out what to do, how to engage the audience in that moment, how to schedule the volunteers and get everything through, that Rhonda would project manage those. But, you know, that might change here and there, but like, so that we kind of divide up like that.
What draws you guys to the idea of creating art for and in public spaces? How do you believe that public art can enhance communities and create meaningful connections with your audiences?
Well, I guess it's hard to speak for both of us, but I've always liked engaging with people. I'm like kind of a people person, and I did a residency in Vancouver, the Branscombe House residency, where I lived in a house for a full year for free in exchange for running workshops in the bottom of the house. And I learned a lot about how people interact with art and how people come into a space, or even how to build a community through art. I was surprised on how you can take art as a vehicle to get people to talk to each other, even just to feel like it became a kind of a community hub, you know, just by maybe it doesn't even matter that they're making something, but it's like almost an excuse to interact. And then from that, like we evolved that. I started just building up on that, how we make, how can we evolve our sculptural practice with making art with people. And
I've always been interested in public space. And in fact, when we were in grad school, we took a really exceptional class from John O'Brien, public art. That's what got us really thinking about public space and the history of public art and strategies of engaging with the public, however that's defined or isn't defined, in public space, however tenuous that might be. And that's really exciting to me. It was an exciting class. But you know, Rhonda, that whole idea of workshops and all that kind of stuff came out of Rhonda's sensibility. I think she brought that into our practice. However, I was open to it because I've always collaborated. When I was an undergrad, I collaborated with another student, and we did all our paintings together. We were in separate classes, and then we made work together for a little bit after, and I loved that. And then I did a residency in New York at Apex Art. I ended up collaborating with an artist there. And you know, I used to be in bands like so many young men, and that, you know, people often ask us, well, how does it work when two people making art together? And I'm like, that's not that unusual. Like, you're just thinking about art, but now that's common in art. But when we started, it was a little more unusual. And I just think, well, bands are a creative entity, and they come together and they make collective decisions. Someone takes this role and that role, but in a way, they're kind of a one entity. And I've loved collaborating, and I love playing music with other people. And I think making art with someone is exactly the same. So collaborating with one person or a big group of people, it's invigorating, and you know, it's exciting. I love losing control of the whole process.
And we actually end up meeting a lot of people. Like here, I ran something like, I don't know, like 10 workshops, and whoever just walks them through the door, you get a discussion with, and I don't know, kind of it's an exciting way to live for me. Like at that moment, we meet these amazing people that you wouldn't have met otherwise. So, and then just how people see the world and how they are visual. Because we took art in school, but a lot of people are interested in art, but they haven't taken art school, so they have a different kind of aesthetic and approach to making things that is exciting for us to watch. So it's nice to invent the prompt for them to draw something from memory, for example. But to see how they interpret that is exciting for us. Sorry.
No, yeah, I think that's a really interesting point with bands and how other kind of art practices outside of visual arts are very collaborative, and it's all about the experience with community and audiences and being directly engaged right in front of people and working with other people to produce these things. Whereas with visual artists, it seems so like far out to be in a duo and like commit to a duo or like a group kind of effort consistently. Like doing one project is one thing, but like coming together and finding that like that balance and that discussion between two people and then bringing it to other people and engaging them in it as well is really interesting. It's an interesting way of thinking about it.
I'd like one thing I'd like to say about it is that, usually when you talk about this kind of interaction, it's for good reason. It's like a positive thing. It's a warm, welcoming experience. But I actually want to clarify that, I said in the beginning, Ron and I, when we worked together, we argued. And I think it's a space of argument. I don't think it's a space about everybody's always happy and it's about, reaffirming some kinds of, I don't know, stereotype about a community or something. What I like about it is it's wild. I like the fact that people come up, they get mad. I've had people come up and get mad at me during these events, very infrequent, and I'll have a discussion with them. I learn a lot from that. They learn from it too, I think, I hope. But I'm excited by that. I have this, maybe it's just from the way I encountered art, but I always thought, well, art was that part of the world where we don't have agreement and we don't have, the rules are a little bit unclear and we're fighting over what they are. And it's not for everybody. I think that was always a really important thing about art for me, was it wasn't for everybody, because you had to do a little bit of work and you had to want to engage with it. And you didn't understand an artwork when you walk in a gallery. It might take you years. So I see these as encounters. They're like allowing people, if they want to engage with that. But I'm also very interested when they don't, or they have there's friction, or the projects go the other direction. They want to interact in ways we didn't want them to. I mean, I don't really have that kind of goal, but I guess you think how something's going to go, and then you want them to zig and they zag. And that's actually why I like to do it at all. If I knew it was all going to just go according to plan, it wouldn't interest me.
It's the exciting part of it, of like that the variable is like who's looking at it, who's experiencing it, and they could be coming from really anywhere and you can't really even plan it really. You could try your best to, I guess. That's really interesting.
And it's just I love that it's just out of context. Somebody may not even be wanting to look at anything that day, and there it is, and they don't even know. Is it art to them? I don't know what it is to them, and I just think it's just an amazing chance, to do something unscripted in a public space.
And I didn't come from an art, like a fine art background, but so at one point I, for example, wasn't at all into abstract art. But then, I love abstract. I love all the different kinds of art now. And I like the idea of trying to open up that window for other people. If maybe at first they're challenged by something, but just like I was, start thinking about it, and then you start to have a better understanding of why this art exists. And I guess I like being, I don't know, what is it, trying to challenge people in a way.
Yeah, reach out, but also, it's a stumbling block too. It's not just, it's an invitation, but there's a trade-off there where it's a problem we're all working through. Every artwork is a problem we're all working through. together.
That's a really good way of putting it. Touching back to when you were mentioning when you were in school and you took a public art class with a professor who really inspired you and kind of like awakened this kind of idea or this idea to pursue this and explore it some more. I was wondering, how did you come into art making, and what was your first encounter or exposure to art?
I think we both talked about as kids, we were always making stuff. I know, Trevor lived in Calgary, and I was born in Winnipeg. And when I like imagine as little kids in our own separate worlds doing kind of the same things. We're just building stuff out of materials around us. And then, I guess naturally I ended up just taking art, going in high school, being always wanting to make art, and then going off into university, and then just continue. And I don't know how would you say it? Would I describe it like that?
So I think that's, I would go back to that too. Childhood, we both made our own toys, did our own this and that. We're interested in illusions, the fantasy of, first of all, making do, being resourceful with materials that are around on hand, which is still part of our practice, and interest in illusions. Toys are illusions, and we're still interested in illusions of a sort. That idea of one material becoming other things. I am still to this day, I get excited when I walk through Valley Village and I see something that's sculpted, and then it's got water, and then it's stones, and then it's a figure or something. I mean, I love that, teasing out a material richness out of one thing, and playing with the limits of materials. So I agree with that. And then I actually didn't mean to go into fine art. I wanted to go into animation and commercial design. And I was very kind of a lazy young student in high school, and I waited too long to register. I should have registered in the Alberta College of Art, and I made a mistake. I registered at the University of Calgary, and I discovered as soon as I registered that I was actually in a fine arts program, and I needed to go to ACA for what I wanted, but I ended up staying in. So, arts is a series of mistakes and misdirections, and that's what I like about it.
Just going with the flow and
Yeah.
and letting it be and embracing that. That's really neat. So this one's a little bit more of like a longer question. So as artists who navigate between traditional art spaces and unconventional settings, such as public engagements and workshops, could you share insights into how this dual involvement influences your artistic expression and connects you with diverse audiences? So, given your experience in facilitating workshops and engaging with the public, what strategies have you found that are effective in bridging that gap between your creative process and the audience? And have there been any particular challenges that you've encountered in these collaborative interactions? I know you mentioned having like kind of angry experiences of people who just reacted. How did you go about that, and how did that make you, I guess, feel or like think about your next projects and stuff?
I think it's a real challenge. It's like kind of an area that we're always trying to make something that is interesting to, say, art audience, but also people, other audiences can also engage with, which is a really hard place to be on that, try to straddle both, because often you end up losing one of those audiences, trying to do one or the other. And it's hard for me to think of that many people that are really successful in that zone. And it can be really soul crushing. Sometimes I just like, we're really out there in the public, in people's faces and engaging. And then sometimes I just want to, pull in, because it's kind of overwhelming after a while. Like right now, I need a break from workshops and people, as much as I love them, and then come back out again. I come back out of that shell and go, okay, I really feel like I want to. Sometimes when you're in your own studio, in your own studio world, you feel like you've broken off from the real world and you disengage with the mess of it. And then I miss it. And then sometimes I want to be protected and not feel vulnerable and exposed and having to defend myself. I'm making it sound like we always have to defend ourselves. It actually very rarely happens where we have to defend ourselves. It's just that you're putting yourself out there. You're not protected in the studio zone. You're out in the middle, like here we're working in the middle of a cafe, and whatever comes in the door, whatever happens is going to happen. And it's exciting. And then sometimes it's really like, like, so, how would you answer that?
That's something on the tip of my tongue. I suddenly
sorry.
slipped out. No, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. I think, I know what I was going to say. I think it's a little different when you're first doing it. And maybe when your practice is young. So you have to remember that before we really started doing work like this, we had about 8 years, I think, of making quite a lot of work, doing quite a lot of exhibitions. And I felt like we had an identity, like something you fall back on. No matter what happened, we kind of know what we're about on some level. And so I feel, and then I feel like the farther along we go, we just can kind of trust in the structure we built, the context we built, the trails that we've gone down. We can keep following them. It's a little bit instinctive, and we don't have to really calculate so much those kind of equations. We try to find ways to get people involved. It's quite pragmatic, though. It's really very pragmatic. I think trying to get how can we get people engaged with this? And Rhonda's really really good at figuring those kinds of things out. And we try to weave those into our practice, but I would say that I think for a younger artist, it might be harder to do it because you come to maybe an exhibition or a temporary public art or permanent public art, and there's demands, engage with this, highlight that, be accessible in this way. Gotta stay up for 10 years, whatever it may be. And that's really a lot. It's kind of like, I can't deal with it sometimes. So I think it gets easier, I would say, for young artists, if you're feeling that it's too much and maybe you think you feel like it caused you to compromise too much. I mean, I think it's you work through the process and you find your way. And I think that's what it is. You have to just keep saying, okay, what can I do with this situation? And we like that constrictions of those situations. So we are fueled by that. If you're not fueled by that, then I wouldn't say do that.
I also have to say, I feel like there's more opportunity in that area now.
Yes.
It feels like there's been kind of a change where people want art that somehow can engage a public, somehow connect with the public. So that ends up there's more opportunities out there, like more open calls that involve public artwork or working with the public to make the artwork or using workshops as part of it somehow. So if you're looking for opportunities as an artist, if you can navigate those waters, then I think it's part of the, I don't know, part of survival in a way. If we want to continue on, for us, it was like a lot about survival, or we just kept on getting asked for those certain things, and so we got better and better at it. But
yeah, it's a little bit of falling into it. Again, art's a series of mistakes. Back at the time when we first started out getting asked to do stuff like this, well, you're sculptors, so you must be able to work with space. It was a little bit more like that then, and so we just ended up, the opportunities were there, and we thought, well, we kind of say yes to everything, quite honestly. We showed it in the park across the street from my house. I mean, like I invited my neighbors, like we'll do anything as long as we find something interesting in it. So if you have that kind of attitude, I don't think you can go wrong. And it's nice to do ones that are like that are way off the cuff. They're not that official. That's how you test. That's how you develop, and that's how you get confidence. And then you learn to get that immediate act of doing it, and what you learn to really savor that. And it helps you when it gets to be maybe a bigger budget thing and there's a lot of pressure. And so you got to find that center. And so one of those centers for us is having our studio practice separate. You can always go back to that. And like you said, you get exhausted sometimes, right? With interactions and so on. So, that's our way of surviving. Everybody's got their own, though.
It's like a grounding space. You have like the place that you can always come back to for when it feels like maybe like you were describing, Rhonda, that there's just so many opinions and so much feedback you're getting back that at a certain point you feel like maybe you have to step back and kind of get back to yourself and like figure out like what it is, like what you're doing, what
You agree with me when I say that, or is that accurate? Like, do you think of making work in the studio like that? Sometimes I feel like maybe you don't feel that way as much as me, but
Um,
like really needing to go back and make studio work sometimes.
oh yeah. Yeah, well, there's also this thing with like when I go to the museum, I'll see work like that an artist that has a studio practice, we think of a traditional studio practice, and I'm really enjoying looking at that work. And then I'm thinking, man, that person, they're just thinking they're having this relationship with what they're doing, and they're not worrying about other people having to contribute to it. They can hone in on skills. And sometimes I really miss that. I just want, and so we do go just make stuff that's our own skills. We're not worrying about trying to integrate other people's skills or different levels of skill. So yeah, I feel like same with you, where sometimes you just need to go back to someone's going back to you before you can go back out again. And
It doesn't take long though when you're like, oh man, I really
you need to
I
be
need to get out there.
yeah, you need to get out there.
it's like a pull, like you have a pull towards it for sure.
Yeah.
It is addicting.
Yeah. I was thinking about also like things, I think all artists kind of have this thing where they have their practice and there's things that inform their practice. And then there's like little creative things on the side that they keep separate sometimes where they go back to it for like a grounding kind of thing. So for example, like for me, like I'm a painter, but I knit on the side and I keep it very, very low key. I'm knitting for me and no one needs to see anything. And it's just like a practice for like, it's still creative, it's still engaging that, but there's no expectations, not from me, not from anyone. And I was curious if you guys have like things like that kind of bring you back to yourself and don't necessarily directly inform your practice, but almost like give you the energy to go back to it, you know?
Yeah. Well, I cook a lot, and it's funny because you're asking how do you get engaged with the audience, and sometimes I use that. It's kind of insane how much a little bit of food in a workshop situation will make people want to stay longer and have this feeling of it's a community thing. Oh, we're all hanging out and sharing food, but I like to research recipes and so on, and sometimes it's very similar to sculpture. So I'll be doing something in the kitchen that like, oh, I was just doing the exact same thing, only with a non-edible material half an hour ago.
But it became part of the work. I mean, the picnic piece.
Oh yeah,
We're cooking people's recipes and making that.
yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. It's almost like you live this life. You're like, oh, this is just my break time where I'm not making art. But then it slowly bleeds into the making art.
That is what I would say is that there are things like that. For me, it's music, but inevitably everything gets materials get drawn through the house. Everybody gets involved, conscripted, and all our activities somehow get incorporated. It's one way or another. It's just the best.
It's almost like all these parts of your identity kind of like merging together and influencing each other, even if you're not conscious of it or doing it on purpose.
Right. Yeah.
It's
For
hard.
sure.
I mean, if you can't, if you don't let your life get completely taken over by it, you can't get the things done. I mean, some of the big public art projects, they're very logistically hard, and that's what it happens. It's just the way it is. Yeah.
I don't want to take up too much of your time, so I kind of wanted to ask you a final question about what's next, what's on the horizon for you. I know currently, I believe you're still in New York today, or yeah, and you guys, yep. So if you wanted to share a little bit about what you were up to or what you're working on next.
Well, we have a public art that has been on the go for 6 years. I'll be in North Vancouver. And it was a 4-part public art piece, and now we're finishing the 5 parts, and the last 3 are going to be finishing up on that. And then we have a outreach project in Sackville, New Brunswick, with the Owens Art Gallery, doing a project on water, which is a totally new thing for us. It's kind of exciting. So
incorporating music.
Incorporating music and
there we go.
So there you go.
Just like I said, like here, the show in New York transforms into this project where people made lanterns during these workshops with Rhonda, and we're installing them today. So that'll be up till December, and then we have a bronze going up on at Eglinton, and well, it actually went up on Thursday. Eglinton and Castleknock. It's a sculpture of the street itself.
Of the
So it's a sculpture of the street.
Oh,
Yeah, so it's a
cool.
perspective view of the street. So that just went up. So we're coming back for the kind of public. I guess it's like an art walk or something on next Saturday, the 9th.
Okay. Very cool. You guys have a lot going on. I understand what you were saying about kind of going back to like kind of like moving away from it and then reapproaching for sure. It seems like it's like quite a bit of things all at once. Very nice. All right. Well, thank you so much, Rhonda and Trevor, for sharing your time with us and your ideas and thoughts and your practice with us. And thank you for letting me pick your brain.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.